My parents favored my twin sister so much that they spent my wedding budget on her. Consequently, I cut them off after refusing my mother's selfish request. I, 23F, have a twin sister named Allison, with whom I am not on good terms. I'm not even on speaking terms with her or my parents. Despite how I've been treated in the past, we used to be on good terms, but I've kept my distance for the last 2 years. They hadn't bothered to contact me either until recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me and is therefore the golden kid by default. My parents only wanted one child because that was what they had planned for, and they didn't have the resources to support two. By the time they discovered it was twins, it was too late, and my mother did not want to take any chances. In high school, I learned about this from my intoxicated uncle at a Thanksgiving celebration. That was pretty much the day I gave up trying to win my folks over. They did what seemed most natural in those circumstances. They had 2 children, but chose to adore only one. That was Allison, not me. Allison and I had an incredible rivalry from childhood to impress our parents. I would try to outdo all she could do, but the more I achieved, the more they appeared to despise me for outperforming their golden child. To be honest, Allison had no interest in competing with me. She was only looking for validation. She claimed to be concerned about the rivalry, but her main skill was manipulation. She was brilliant at convincing people that she was offended when I outdid her. This resulted in many, including our parents, relatives, and even some classmates, supporting her feelings while tearing me down to help her feel better. Ultimately, the competition provided me with good grades and several extracurricular accomplishments to demonstrate my superiority. Meanwhile, Allison captured my parents' attention, affirmation, and sympathy. I was always cast as the villain, making her feel inadequate. Looking back, I don't think I'd swap what I've achieved, but I wish I had rubbed my success in her face more at the time. 2 years ago, we turned 21. By then, we'd both graduated, Allison from a conventional college and me from one of the state's best business schools. I was the valedictorian and received a scholarship, so my parents saved a lot of money on my education. Call me crazy, but I honestly believed my parents would be proud of me. They were not. Instead, they concentrated solely on Allison and her troubles. Allison had barely made ends meet and was looking for work, only to be turned down again. I, on the other hand, was already working from home as an intern for a corporation. Despite my accomplishments, my parents did not bother to congratulate me. Instead, they were absorbed with concern for Allison's future. I was not surprised, but rather disappointed. I was still living with my parents and hadn't saved enough money to move out, so I chose to keep my feelings to myself. But after our 21st birthday, I couldn't anymore. I expected them to do something significant for us. However, the day before our birthday, I learned that everyone had left me at home alone. All they left me was a note saying they were going to the beach with Allison and her friends and would be back in a few days. I vividly recall being completely devastated when I read that note. They had taken Allison and her pals on a beach trip, but all I received was a happy birthday card and a $50 gift card. Many aspects of my childhood had been unfair, but this was where I drew the line. It was so disheartening and callous that I decided to leave that day and never look back. I had a few friends who were ready to let me stay with them until I could find and afford my own place. It wouldn't take long because the firm where I was interning was likely to recruit me full-time once the internship concluded. I only needed a place to reside for 2 months at the most. I packed my belongings and moved in with a friend without informing my parents or sister, and I have not looked back since. They didn't miss me enough to want me to come back. They did phone me on my birthday, the day after I moved out, but not to wish me well. They said they'd be returning shortly and recommended I hire a plumber to fix the tap. I informed them that I was no longer living at home and had moved out, hoping that this information would elicit a response from them. But no such luck. My mom seemed fine with it, and Allison didn't mind. That was it. That was my final proper conversation with my family. Since then, I haven't seen them or heard from them again. My friends occasionally told me about Allison, which kept me up to date on her life, but that was about it. They knew nothing about my parents, and my parents knew nothing about me. I've worked hard for the past 2 years and finally got my own place. It's hardly a mansion, but it's a lovely apartment in a desirable neighborhood. The rent is reasonable for my wage, which is fantastic, especially because most people my age haven't been able to accomplish this as quickly. I'm pleased with how my life has turned out, and I've done my best to keep my family out of my thoughts. Allison recently married a businessman nearly 10 years older than her and is now living it up in California. I thought everything was fine in my family until 2 days ago when I received a call from my uncle. He told me I needed to come visit my parents right away because they had been in a terrible car accident and wanted to see me. I went to the hospital as soon as possible because, of course, I'm not so hard-hearted. When I arrived, I discovered that they had already been in the hospital for a few days and were recovering from their injuries. A truck had hit their car. They had survived, but with significant injuries. They didn't have health insurance because my father had always believed that if we looked after ourselves, we wouldn't need to go to the hospital. This was by far one of the most ridiculous opinions I've ever heard. My parents immediately phoned my sister, but she informed them that she would not return or assist them. Apparently, it was tacky of our parents to seek financial assistance from her wealthy husband so soon after their marriage. She did not want her spouse to think she was a gold digger. She also didn't want to travel back since she couldn't leave her home and 2 children, who weren't even her own. They were her husband's children from a previous marriage, but she was too preoccupied with playing happy family with her husband's family to see her own parents in the hospital following a tragic automobile accident. She couldn't have helped even if she had wanted to. Without her husband's assistance, she would not have been able to purchase even the flight ticket back home. After all, she's now a stay-at-home parent caring for children who aren't her own. So much for being the favorite daughter and golden child. I couldn't believe they didn't even call me first. It became even more irritating when my uncle informed me that my parents now expected me to pay their medical bills. It's a large sum of money, and if I agreed, I'd have a difficult time recovering financially. I don't want to spend so much money, especially on people who have never cared about me or shown me love throughout my life. I know they have other family members that can care for them. Even if I don't pay, somebody else will. However, my parents appear to be more worried about the shame of begging others for money. They warned me that borrowing money from others would be more humiliating than borrowing from me, because they'd have to repay it sooner than I would require. That is what they said when they asked me to pay their debts. They even assured me that I would receive my money back quickly. I do not know what to do. I'm in a bad situation. I can either disgrace my parents by refusing to pay their medical bills and focusing on myself, or I may pay for them, lose my money, and then wait indefinitely for them to repay it. To be completely honest, I don't want to help them at all. We haven't spoken in 2 years, and I've had a horrible relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. They're like strangers to me now, so I don't feel inclined to assist them. But if I don't help, am I no better than Allison? That would be difficult to accept. Is it wrong of me not to want to help my parents pay their hospital costs after such a tragic accident? I've decided not to aid my parents. It was a difficult decision to make, but I was confident that their bills would be handled by someone else. They have nothing to worry about. They just contacted me because they didn't want to ask their other relatives. They were overly egoistic. I haven't told them about my decision yet. How do you tell your family that you're not going to help your parents pay for their medical bills after such a tragic accident? It's been nearly 5 days since I met them. After reading the comments, I realized I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. Because she didn't help our parents, I felt compelled to step up and prove that I was the better daughter or whatever. I guess I'll never be able to get rid of that competitive streak, no matter how hard I try. It's simply who I am now. The majority of the comments criticized my parents' lack of health insurance, and I agree. It was quite silly of my father to discourage it. If I had been a part of their lives, I would have ensured they were insured. He didn't even have his automobile insured since he believed he was such a good driver. They're happy that the collision was caused by the truck driver. Otherwise, they'd have had to pay for the auto repairs themselves. As for my parents' financial position, which many of you have inquired about, I would say they are fine. They are neither rich nor poor. My father is the head of sales at his company, while my mother works in human resources at a smaller firm. Their combined salary is sufficient to allow them to live well, especially since they are no longer responsible for supporting me or Allison. Allison and I did not have to worry about money growing up, but we also couldn't afford to live extravagantly. We were middle class, and my parents still are. I don't see why they can't pay their own medical bills. If they can borrow money and promise to repay it eventually, they will undoubtedly be able to pay their own debts. They haven't provided me a clear explanation for why they can't, and I doubt I will ever find out. I told my parents that I would not fund their bills. They had been contacting me for the previous week, and yesterday I knew I couldn't just ignore them and wait till they were released from the hospital. So, I answered their calls and told them I'd thought about it and didn't feel compelled to help. As expected, they did not take it well. My mother tore into me, shrieking as loudly as she could with her broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and used the usual slurs. My father, on the other hand, just told me that I was no longer his daughter and hung up once my mother had finished yelling. It didn't hurt like I expected. Honestly, it had been a long time since I felt like their daughter. I can't recall when I last felt loved by my parents. They hadn't spoken to me in 2 years on purpose because I moved out after they snubbed me on a significant birthday. In many ways, I had never truly had parents. I'm just going to keep living my life as I have for the last 2 years, and maybe even before that. This decision has little impact on me, despite my parents' expectations. Unfortunately, after my talk with my parents, my uncle called to give me another earful. I hung up after a few seconds because I didn't want this from him either. They can think anything they want about me. It doesn't matter anymore. Later, my uncle texted me to let me know that my parents might still ask other family members for money. He also indicated that my parents had decided to use the wedding fund they had put up for me and Allison. They had already spent more than half of it on Allison's wedding, and what remained was squandered on a trip to Europe. That's why they had almost little savings left and couldn't meet their medical bills. So, the riddle is solved. Of course, my uncle told me all of this to make me feel terrible, but all I felt was relief that I hadn't wasted my hard-earned money on their expenses. They had carelessly wasted their own cash, which was not my fault. It was not my responsibility that they did not have insurance owing to their erroneous ideas. They could beg money from family or go to hell, but I was not going to give them anything. They were no longer entitled to anything from me, including my time and money. Hey, something pretty strange happened today, and I need to get it off my chest. I haven't been able to inform my friends about what has been going on because most of the people I know have only known me for a short time. I don't think I want to share anything about my family history with these people, so Reddit is all I have. It's been about 2 weeks since I last spoke with my folks. Allison showed up at my apartment a few hours ago, around the evening. Her unexpected visit astonished me, first and foremost, because I did not expect her to know where I lived. Apparently, one of our high school friends told her about the neighborhood where I lived, and she asked around to find out exactly where I was. That is a lot of effort for her to do simply to meet me, of all people. She looked and acted far differently than I remembered. She's gotten more polished and sophisticated, which is a significant change from the way she used to speak in high school. Now she sounds more ladylike and behaves better. Her fashion sense has evolved, as has her jewelry, and her makeup appears more sophisticated. It felt as if I wasn't even speaking to Allison. But one thing has not changed: who she is as a person. I guess you can't put cosmetics on your heart and instruct people to name it Mrs. Davis, as she did to herself. Her personality and ideas have undoubtedly not changed. She knocked on my door, and I let her in. I was startled to see her, but also interested as to why she had stopped by. I decided to hear her out. After some small conversation about her life, in which she unprompted told me everything she'd been up to and boasted about how wonderful her life was as a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers married to a wealthy man, I politely nodded through her presentation. She talked about how she had nothing to worry about but her cuticles, and even began urging me to do the same, telling me how underappreciated being a traditional housewife was. I couldn't wait for her to stop chatting about extraneous topics and get to the issue. Finally, after roughly 15 minutes of talking about her life, she explained why she was here. Apparently, she had returned to see our parents since they had begged her to do so following the accident. They did not want her money. They simply wanted her to be there for them. After 2 weeks, she decided to return, and while she was here, she thought she'd pay me a visit so we could finally bury the hatchet. Thus far, so good. But then she began complaining. She claimed our parents were too needy and disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to leave her 2 babies with their nanny merely to visit them. She stated she loathed our parents for forcing her to choose between them and her children. I can never understand why she keeps referring to them as her children when they are clearly not hers. They are her husband's children from his previous marriage. Even though I hadn't asked, she proceeded to tell me a lot about her marriage and spouse. According to what I gathered, Allison's husband most likely married her solely to boost his chances of obtaining at least partial custody of his children, which he accomplished. But she believed he loved her or something. He had been in a custody fight for a long time, and as a full-time businessman, he didn't have enough time for his children. His ex-wife was using this against him. Then he claimed that he was engaged and planned to marry as soon as the divorce was finalized, which tipped the scales in his favor. Allison told me all of this while gloating about how she saved those children. To me, it sounded like her husband had cheated her. They hadn't known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was obvious he wasn't in love with her. Nobody falls in love that easily, especially after a divorce. But Allison appeared blissfully unaware, or perhaps she knew he didn't love her but was ready to overlook it due to his large money balance. She seemed content being a glorified nanny to her husband's children. On top of that, she was upset with our parents for wanting her at their side after they had been in a tragic accident. She somehow believed that being there for them was detracting from her time with her new family, which comprised a husband who most likely did not love her and 2 children who were not biologically connected to her. These children appeared to be doing well with their nanny, just as they were with her. If ungrateful had a face, Allison would be it. I am not a fan of my parents, but when she mentioned how needy they were, I couldn't believe this was the lady they had repeatedly chosen over me. She eventually got to the point of her visit and informed me that she was departing in 2 days. She had promised Mom and Dad that she would remain for at least a month, but now, she stayed. She was tired of hearing them talk about the tragedy and how it was the worst experience of their lives for the 10th time. She stated she needed to return home soon. What is her solution? She asked me to reconcile with our parents and take her place. She did not want to feel terrible about leaving them when they needed her. She had no idea they had cut me off again because I refused to help with their bills, most likely because they don't talk about or think about me, so they didn't tell Allison. She came here for sympathy. She wanted me to feel sorry for her for having to deal with our parents and abandoning her family. She intended to use her pity to persuade me to step into her shoes and provide emotional support for our parents because she did not feel up to the role. It was typical Allison manipulation, but I'd known her techniques for too long to fall for them. I had no intention of telling her how I truly felt while she was in my home because it would undoubtedly lead to a fight. So, I promised her I'd try, but I know I won't. She left after telling me to keep in touch, which we both knew she didn't mean. Honestly, I was relieved to see her leave. Not only is she a nasty and narcissistic person, but she is also really boring to talk to. I could barely say anything while she went on about her dull existence in California. Her life revolves primarily around parties, stepchildren, and her husband. She believes she is living a dream, but I found it depressing. Her husband clearly does not love her, and her children already spend half of their time with their mother. Of course, they'll grow up to prefer their biological mother over Allison, and they probably already do based on what I've heard. But it's fine since she chose that life for herself. The life I chose for myself will be far away from my family, who are undeserving of even a quarter of my care or pity. If anything, today taught me that I was correct to distance myself from my parents and sister. I do not want to be a part of these people's lives. They're really selfish and vicious, and I doubt they're capable of thinking about anyone other than themselves, particularly Allison. I'm ashamed to be linked to such folks. At least now I've been able to permanently cut links with all of them. It is unlikely that they will be able to contact me anytime soon. I blocked Allison as soon as she departed, and I've previously barred my parents and other relatives for a few days. I believe I am secure from being disturbed by my relatives in the near future. I'll pray that they don't try to contact me again after this, because I'm much better off without them.